fellow in the back, if you can hear me okay, raise your hand. Do we have one? Somebody, thank you. We got 2 or 3. All right, if my voice wanes and you hear my volume drop, if you would raise your hand, I'd appreciate it. I'd like to begin by just making a few comments that back in the early 90s, President Bush made the statement that he could see the New World Order coming into fruition. And then, of course, we all remember President Obama saying right before he was elected that this is going to be a foundational transformation. And I don't know whether you realize it or not, but Al Gore said it's going to be a wrenching transformation. So now this presentation is an effort to help you and everyone that I can contact, give them some idea about what kind of transformation we're talking about. And I'd like to begin with just a couple. Oh, could we turn these? Is that one? Wrong one? Wrong one? That one. Okay. Let's see, where was it? Just I'm trying to pick up on where we were as a society and now where we're going by just using a couple of slides and some graphics before we get into the main part dealing with sustainable development. And really this is a organizational chart for every society that man has ever created in his recorded history, and all you have to do is just plug in the various aspects. The philosophical teaching, of course, you'll have some entity that's charged with the responsibility of enforcing that teaching, and then you usually have some dictator or crowned head of Europe, as this depicts it in a few minutes. The very first example is the Christian faith. And of course, in Europe, that was the Bible. We had the Archduke of Canterbury that was in charge of the Church of England. He was in partnership with the King of England. This would apply to any of the crowned heads of Europe. And in fact, it goes all the way back to Samuel, as Samuel was charged with the responsibility of anointing God's chosen one with a head with oil. And then the people recognized that he was to lead them. Well, now that was brought all the way forward, and the hereditary king was brought into place based on that concept. So it was said that after the church leader had anointed the king, he became the defender of the faith. Well, today we could call that a governance system. If you're taking notes, write down governance. Look at your comprehensive plan and other documents and see if you see the word governance instead of government. We also would know this as a public-private partnership. Governance is not government. It is the framework of rules, institution, and practices that set limits on behavior of individuals, organizations, and companies. It is intended to be, as you will see in a few minutes, a self-regulating system. And I do not mean that you will regulate your actions. The system will regulate how you interact with the environment. Well, if you had Christianity on one end, certainly the other end of that spectrum would be atheism. Just happened to pick Joseph Stalin. Of course, he had a code enforcement officer always on the ready to make sure that his dictates were carried through. I don't know if you happen to see the History Channel's special on this, but he required that every home remove religious icons. They were all destroyed, and in their place was a photograph of Stalin. So now he really became their god. It was truly a merger of church and state, all the time professing that religion was in fact an opiate for the masses. The exception to it was, of course, the American War for Independence, where the slogan of that war was "There was no king but King Jesus," and we regulate our actions according to the thought that at some point we're going to stand before that throne and account for what we have done in this life. Now, that also means that we'll account for what we should have done in this life. I don't want to have to stand personally at that throne and say, well, I had an important football game and it was going to be the championship for the year and I just had to attend it, or I had to go fishing on that day when I should have been doing something else. So if we look at this, we know that we're responsible to a higher authority. If we regulate it according to that concept, love one another as you love yourself, we need no police force, no army. Unfortunately, because of the fallen nature of man, We do require those in our society. The other situation on the right-hand side is that the individual is responsible to the church and the government, and he interacts with all of the entities created by those two. On the other side, the people come together and they elect the most worthy among themselves to hold those offices, and they decide what kind of judiciary and executive branch and the legislative branch of government exists. This one created liberty and freedom. It is limited to self-government, not governance. It is the only one that acknowledges a higher authority. We have unalienable rights granted to us by God. That is not an opinion. That is in the first published document of the American people. If you disavow that thought, then your rights come from the hand of man. Now, I purposely hyphenated that word because I want to make the point that your rights are unalienable. In other words, no entity created by man has the authority to place a lien on those rights. They have, of course, across history, abrogated or violated those rights. If you look at the first communist revolution in France and follow it all the way through to the United Nations doctrines and documents, you'll find they use the phrase inalienable rights. Those are rights that the possessor can give away. Unalienable rights are those rights which you cannot give away because the Creator has bestowed them on you. In my opinion, if this experiment in self-government, if we lose it, we'll never regain it. It's just that simple. It's occurred once in the recorded history of man. This one creates justice. Frederick Bastiat, if you haven't read him, you need to, the law. He said that justice is a negative concept. On this side, we have the precautionary principle. It is principle 15 of Agenda 21. In this book, there are 27 principles. Number 15 is the precautionary principle, and it says that you are guilty and you have to come before the court and prove yourself innocent. In the other system, our system, it's the only one that has, to my knowledge, ever been in history that you are innocent until the government proves you guilty. Of course, over here we have, under this system is created the church, family, and government. And as long as they operate within their authorized sphere, freedom and liberty exist. In the other system, we have government, faith-based initiative. Now, George Bush started that faith-based initiative, and Obama has greatly increased it. We have non-governmental organizations, and we have corporations. Now, if you're taking notes, World Business Council on Sustainable Development. Over 200 of the world's largest corporations have already adopted this philosophy. Look them up. And of course, this is intended to, again, be a self-regulating governance system operating all in conjunction with all of those groups. Now, this is my impression of what I'm telling you, and I think, as most people have seen that I've been on this tour, they agree with me at the end that indeed sustainable development is a religion, and that it is the religion of globalization. President Bush, the 41st President of the United States, signed this in Rio in 1992. It has 40 chapters that are generally called soft law. It is being enacted as we speak. There is a movement to make it mandatory, and there are 3 international treaties that are affecting us greatly currently. Oh, and by the way, the progressives of the 1930s were adamant in their position, and I really believe that the people that adhere to this philosophy are of the same vein, and if something isn't done, it's going to wind up just like it did in Germany. Now, we often hear it said that the United Nations is just going to come in and take over. That is not true. In 1992, we voluntarily our representatives went to Rio and signed this document. Then we agreed to submit voluntarily a report on a regular basis detailing how we have spent money and what we have done to comply with the dictates of Agenda 21. And this report is from 2002, and it's 156 pages long, goes into great detail. All you have to do to get a copy of it is go to the United Nations database and look up the country profile. So there's an alphabetical listing of about 170, 75 countries. scroll down to the bottom and you can get a copy of this. This is the index page for the World Summit on Sustainable Development 2002. Now, when I punch the button, hopefully everything works right, you're going to see a total of 9 slides go across the screen. The first 7 deal with the opening ceremony for this conference. And you're going to see photographs of what was occurring on the stage, and you're going to hear what is supposed to be a very wise man telling a young group of people about what's wrong with the earth. Now, he has a very heavy accent, so I printed the words on the screen so you can follow along. After he gets through, there's going to be 2 slides where Colin Powell says that you and I and President Bush have an enduring commitment to sustainable development. So if you can't hear this, let me know in the background. Regulate the volume.
Life began with the earth, then came the plants, the animals, and finally the human being. Yes, we are all children of Mother Earth. That is why we must take care of her and be her custodians. She is the hand that feeds us and the heart that heals us. But I'm safe to say, we are failing. Greed and foolishness are eating deep into the fabric of humankind. We are failing to love and care for Mother Earth. This summit has cemented a new vision of sustainable development. The Johannesburg Plan of Action consolidates our work plans into one common agenda that includes our best thinking on sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, President Bush and the American people have an enduring commitment to sustainable development.
Well, of course, that was the national and international level. Now what you're about to see is 5 minutes of testimony last June where the Carroll County Commissioner from Maryland gave testimony before the Banking Committee dealing with the Sustainable Livable Communities Act. The act has since passed, and many counties in this state have applied for the grant. It ties them to every aspect of sustainable development. Now, she's going to tell you, and at the time, by the way, she was the spokesperson for the National Association of County Commissioners. The association in Alabama has been implementing this agenda and has not acknowledged any connection whatsoever with sustainable development, but it's clear when you read the tenets of what they're doing. Now, she goes through the 20-year history, talking about many, many programs, smart growth, green, carbon footprint reduction. Then she talks about setting aside 1/3 of the county. And in the middle of it, she says government, local government, is responsible for determining how growth, development, and livability will occur. That's part and parcel of the comprehensive plans in Alabama. It's all a cookie-cutter thing. So now if you can't hear it, let me know. It takes about 24 seconds for it to spool up. And while it's doing that, I want to make the comment that my Senator Shelby is right here. He is supposedly a conservative. He has not uttered one word about this, and he has been apprised on more than one occasion about this subject. He bears more responsibility than does Senator Dodd, who is a proponent of it.
It's my privilege to represent NACO today. NACO